The big stories this week. Legislators in the BVI's House of Assembly voiced their concerns and support for the controversial airport expansion project during the 2017 budget debate. And in addition to that, another big story this week, medical doctors calling sick at Peebles Hospital. Kathy, let's begin with this issue of the airport expansion project. Now, all along, we've been hearing business people and residents in the BVI and the opposition voice their concerns about not why it is that the project isn't fitting for the BVI in terms of what the Premier has said about the BVI needing more airlift to guarantee more tourists coming to the country as investments in the tourism product increase and to boost the financial services and other businesses. But what the concerns have been is about the financial readiness of the territory to take on this project. And before we delve into what exactly was said, let's listen to the legislators, Alvera Maduro-Caines, Delores Christopher, and Dr. Hubert O'Neill on what they had to say about this issue in the HOA on Thursday.
Cheaper is not always the best. You have to examine what they're offering. What is the state of our finances in the territory at this time? And I would say to the Honorable Premier, these concerns should not be taken lightly.
There are too many things in our country that needs to be fixed that I think should take priority. Infrastructure or financial services is the time for us to venture into such a great financial constraint that would probably hold us hostage for a number of years.
The bigger question here is, can we afford not to develop the airport?
So Kathy, Dr. O'Neill said we can't afford to not do this project because our tourism industry depends on it. But some comments that stood out for me from what the female legislators had to say. Mrs. Maduro-Caines said at the end of the day, the BVI runs the risk of being held hostage by this investment financially for generations to come. And Mrs. Christopher said that despite the fact that you accepted the bid that was cheaper, at the end of the day, cheaper doesn't always equal the best product. And she also added, and this is something that a lot of persons in the BVI have raised concerns about, that in doing a project that we may not be prepared for financially, we run the risk of having the UK re-exert control or attempting to re-exert control over the territory.
Yes, what Alvera said also made a whole lot of sense to me, and this is what you've been hearing, the grumbles among people in the territory, is that there is so much to be done internally. The road infrastructure, drainage and sewage, these are things that are critical. Education, they're all critical at this point. And if we take this money and put it into another place on a project which they feel can wait a little longer, and like Honorable Delores said, it can hold on for a little longer. It would still be done, but just not at this time, because these critical things, people are also fearing that what has happened to the USVI in terms of its finances may very well be the situation of the British Virgin Islands if we're not careful.
And so today, Kathy, from what we have seen and heard thus far, these two legislators, Mrs. Christopher and Mrs. Maduro-Caines, are getting a lot of thumbs up in terms of having the guts to stand up as government legislators to voice, while they're not saying, no, don't do it,
exactly,
but bear the concerns in mind, think on these things. And another area regarding this project that persons would have hoped to have been able to get some sort of update or inkling about by now in December, when the Premier announced on Boxing Day that China Harbor Communications was the preferred bidder for this project, he had also given a 3-month timeline within which to wrap up negotiations. But as you learned at a press conference last week, things are not quite there just yet, which we all suspect.
Yes, from what we understand from the Premier is that, yes, there are talks going on, but to get down to the hardcore negotiation, as at February 16 when we had that press conference, they're not there yet.
Let's hear the Premier tell us that himself, Kathy.
There are ongoing discussions in terms of reference being worked on before formal negotiations. They haven't started as yet, formal discussion. But we have been having discussions on the way forward and in developing the terms of reference in the negotiating committees. And some of the discussion, of course, involved the same company, CCC.
And so, Kathy, the fiscal year has a far way to go, and this budget debate picks up again next week. So it will be interesting to see who else weighs into this particular area of the debate pertaining to the airport expansion, and what happens regarding the negotiations with CCCC going forward for the remainder of the year. Now, we can't go from the big story without looking at another big story which occurred this week, where doctors at Peebles were sick. Not really. Well, to be truthful, the VP of the Medical Association told us that while for some medical practitioners it was a protest action, for others they were actually sick and actually ended up getting days off. But at the end of the day, there was a sick out because the medical practitioners are disgruntled with the disparities in the pay scale and benefits being awarded to doctors from the BVI and doctors that have been recruited from outside of the BVI to work at Peebles.
I've been doing some digging to get a better understanding other than the surface information that we've been hearing. And I'll try to sum that up very quickly. It said that the BVI HSA was paying a sum of almost $1 million per year for on-call doctor. This is a part of the contract that they were receiving on a monthly basis, monies for being on call, but there was a change that was made to remove it. So only when you actually be on call, then you are paid. So that pulls away some money from them. Then there was the other issue that there is an alleged disconnect between the administrative arm or the chief of medicine at the hospital and these doctors. They claim that they don't have this very good relationship and they're not in communication, and that fueled some. And we understand also that, like the letter said, they had an audience in December. I understand that it was Bishop Klein that they met with in December.
The
former chairman. And then I am told that he met with them again in January at the turn of the new year. And it was only 2 days after that meeting with the doctors that he got the big boot.
What we can definitively say is that the doctors were able to meet with the board on Tuesday during that board meeting and to lay out their grouses. And what the Medical Association has told us is that going forward, what they've been asked to do is to present a list of their recommendations regarding the matter to the board, so that the board can respond once and for all to this issue. So then we can expect that this issue will be resolved, hopefully, within short order. And just before we go, one last issue regarding the NHI. We learned from the Standing Finance Committee report that officials from the NHI responded to this issue of whether or not they are within their right to suspend the benefits of employees whose employers have been delinquent in contributing to the NHI.
And so we've learned that they cannot. Quite a number of persons went in and they paid. We're hoping to God that they stick to their obligation, paying to the NHI. Don't take this information out to mean hands up, I ain't gonna pay or gonna pay, be very tardy in the way I pay.
Because the NHI at the end of the day, based on what we understand, will not be allowing that to take place, because going forward in 2017, they'll be taking the necessary course of action to ensure that employers are paid up. And with that, we have have to end it here on The Big Story. Until next week, check us out on Facebook, YouTube, and on the JTV Channel 55 website. I'm Peter Gay on behalf of Kathy. See you next week.